Welcome to another episode of the Use Your Power Show. Use Your Power is brought to you by RevUp Texas. RevUp stands for Register, Educate, Vote, Use Your Power. I'm Julie Espinoza, your host, and I am the Assistant Director at Reach of Plano. And RevUp is a collaboration of nonpartisan organizations that work to increase the power of the disability vote. Today, we have a historian of sorts with us, and I'm going to ask her, I'm going to self-describe, and then I'm going to ask her to describe. I am a white, middle-aged female woman with a white wall behind me and an orange picture. Stephanie, can you self-describe for us?
Sure. I'm Stephanie Thomas, and I'm a white woman with gray hair and proudly getting old. And I have a green room behind me with a picture of Frida Kahlo.
So Stephanie Thomas is a former ADAPT organizer, and she is the curator of the ADAPT Online History Museum. And she's got a lot of great stories and memories of people using their power. If you all are not aware of it, this summer we celebrate Olmstead. And Stephanie was one of the people that used her power to help get people out of institutions into the community. So we welcome you, Stephanie. And how did you become involved with Olmstead?
Well, when ADAPT turned away from the issue of lifts on buses because they were required under the ADA, we had a lot of people in our group that were people that had gotten out of institutions and were living in the community. And the whole thrust became freeing our people from institutions. And so around that same time, we were all reading the ADA regs and getting trained on it and everything. And it became really obvious to a lot of us that the integration mandate of the ADA could apply to people who were in nursing homes and other institutions. And we thought, why can't they just use the money that's being used in nursing homes or other institutions and pay for the person in the community? Because it's a lot cheaper in the community. And what's going on with this? And actually, Steve Gold filed a lawsuit called the Helen L. lawsuit. And that was a precursor to the Olmstead case. Steve Gold is an attorney. I think you all have spoken with him before, and he did a lot of work with ADAPT. And so that case sparked a lot of lawyers getting off and doing similar cases. And in Georgia, a lawyer named Sue Jameson worked with two women who were in a state institution there, Lois Curtis and Elaine Wilson. They were stuck in an institution waiting on one of the endless waiting lists to get out. And the same concept applied there. Why can't we just use these dollars to recognize disabled people's right to live in the community? And that case went on up through the food chain of the courts, and it got up to the Supreme Court, and they said, eventually, with the Olmstead decision, they said that people with disabilities had the right to live in the most integrated setting appropriate. And so, all the time that this was going on, ADAPT continued our protests to push the administration and to push Congress, and here in Texas to push the state legislature to get more integrated and more community services for people. So it's kind of a hand-in-hand thing of the courts doing their thing and ADAPT doing a lot of street protesting, and I'm sure other people advocating in other ways. I think that a lot of disability history comes from what Bob Kafka likes to call the pitchfork approach to advocacy, which is where you use many things at the same time. So
that pitchfork approach sounds like a very powerful tool. Do you remember people getting excited when they realized they now had power because of Olmstead and money follows the person?
Well, I think what was really excellent and cool about it was that at that time, especially, people did feel their power more because they felt that they had achieved the Americans with Disabilities Act, and now they had this tool. And one of the things that a lot of us learned from the passage of the Rehab Act of 1973 and Section 504 is that you can have a great tool, but if you don't use it, it basically gets rusty and it's of no use. Everybody expects it to be nothing. And so when ADA passed, there was a big effort to use the ADA, because a lot of the things that are required under Title II of the ADA, which is the part that covers state and local government, are things that are required under Section 504, which was passed many years before. But those things were not pushed and promoted. And so people kind of thought 504 was a nothing thing. And or a lot of people did. And so the idea was to use the power that we had gained in our disability community to push for more implementation of the ADA. And I think that in places where people did that, they got a lot further than places that didn't use their power and didn't use the tools that they had. And Olmstead is a really good example of that.
Yeah. So you're saying that when these tools came out, you personally remember people feeling like they're not going to use these tools. They didn't believe people would use their power. Is that?
Well, when 504 happened, it was such a slow, gradual time of it happening that I think that what you're describing did happen quite a bit, because when I came on the scene, which was a little bit later than other people, people never, they didn't talk about 504 a lot as a big tool for social change. And you didn't hear, people knew about it, but that wasn't being used very much. And I used it on a couple things, and it wasn't really, it was kind of novel that would happen. Well, at least in the people that I knew, the civil rights approach to, protests and demands and so forth, using those tools to get the ADA and to get lifts on buses and to get some of the other things that the ADA covered, they felt that strength within themselves because they had made it happen. And so now they were damn sure going to use it now that they had spent all that time and energy, making it happen. So, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, you said something that people, because they used their power with the ADA, they were more inclined to continue using their power.
Right.
And you were involved in a lot of the protest and different things that have happened, but now you're a museum curator.
Right.
How do you feel that is an extension of using your power? What is your passion in doing this project, the Disability History Museum?
Well, one of the things about it that I feel is that as time has gone by, people start to take things for granted. And, there was a lot of history of what went into 504, but besides Judy Heumann, even though she did wonderful things, there was a lot of other people that did a lot of other things. And that's very much kind of disappeared. And so I think that it's important for us to know how things happen. And I think it's important to bring that forward. And I feel it's really important. One thing that I see happening a lot in just in the whole world is that, one or two people, sometimes when people talk about the civil rights movement, it's like Martin Luther King. He was the only one. There were hundreds of organizers. There were thousands of individuals who put their bodies on the line. And that's true in the women's movement and in a lot of other movements, environmental. And it's definitely true in the disability rights movement. And yet so much of that is disappearing. And I feel like I fought side by side with so many people in ADAPT who don't get credit for what they did. And I can't shine a spotlight on every single one, but I sure as heck want to have as much of their contributions as possible noted. And I also feel like it's important for people to realize that, it wasn't like somebody just said, oh, we should have an ADA, and then we had it. That it took a fight. It took people getting arrested, and it took people confronting authority. And that happened very much all over the country, and it happened here in Texas. And that's how we got the things that we were able to get and get implemented, the things that we were able to get implemented. And so I think it's important to know that history and to know what happened.
And it's important to give the credit to people with disabilities using their power. Whereas if you look at it from a textbook history point of view, it's a law was passed, and
Right.
that was it.
That's true.
So when people with disabilities, the future generations, look at the museum, how will you tailor it to inspire them to use their power? Is it, what kind of experience will they have when they look at your online museum?
Well, right now it's pretty focused on just getting up the news articles and some videos and so forth, and some photographs, because making things accessible is quite a bit of just legwork, and so that's what I'm working on now. But what I'm hoping is to add some more other parts of it as well. I want to show the banners, the buttons, the
work,
some of the theater, the work and the fun and the creativity that went in as well, because there's a lot of creativity, and that's the part that's more fun. And I think that it's important to have some fun, because we're fighting very serious subjects, and we're fighting them in sometimes very tedious and difficult kinds of ways. And so, if we can support ourselves, it's a good thing.
And I know that history might show we have an institutional bias. We think that nursing homes are good places that take care of you. And so this history museum shows what it's really like. And I'm very excited, folks. Stephanie is sharing some videos and some photos with us today that I think will inspire all of us to appreciate the power that people used. And I know that seeing that is a true picture, and we don't get a true picture from society at large about what we have done and about what we go through. So there are some pictures that we're going to be looking at, and I was hoping if you could kind of give us the little story behind each one.
Sure. Well, I have pictures of Lois and Elaine, because I think that they're just known as LC and EW. And I never met Elaine personally, but I did meet Lois. She's a talented artist. But I think that it's important that they also get recognized. Sometimes it's called the Olmstead. Well, he was the quote unquote enemy. He was the guy that was in charge of human services in Georgia and keeping people locked up. So
Wow.
I think it's important to know Lois and Elaine, and just to know, they weren't just a couple of
Initials.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So that there's two of them. And then I liked, and Sue, I also have a picture of Sue Jameson. She was the attorney. She's a wonderful woman who really believes in disability rights, and was a strong advocate for her clients. And I think that that's important. And then I also wanted to highlight Steve Gold, because he did the original Helen L case that started off a lot of these lawsuits. And also he is a great, in my opinion, role model for an attorney who's working in the rights movement, because he tries to partner with disabled people and with politicized disabled people who are working. He would come to protests. He would talk with people in the streets and at the actions after they were over and so forth, and share ideas and get ideas, and make sure that what he was doing was not just some separate legal thing, but was part of the movement. And that, I think, is very, very important, and it doesn't happen enough.
One of the things you mentioned was there was the money follows the person. It seemed to be a novel idea that you kind of look at that and you go, why did it take so long for someone to figure out to give the money to services instead of to the institution? Do you think people with disabilities are now thinking that way, that the money should pay for this instead of for that? Do they know about money follows the person? Are they invested in that philosophy of the money should follow me with me in charge?
Well, I think that there are some people that are, and I mean, literally over 100,000 people nationally and tens of thousands of people in Texas have gotten out using that idea. So hopefully
That's huge for Texas. I just have to interrupt you there. That is huge for the state of Texas.
I totally agree.
So, I mean, think all those people that are out of nursing homes. So anyhow, I'm sorry, I'll let you continue.
That's okay. No. And it's not just nursing homes. It's also other kinds of institutions like large group homes and state supported living centers, as they call them now. Back in my day, they were state schools, but that was a stupid name for them. Anyway, but I don't really think that the idea that disabled people have a right to live in the community has quite sunk in as much as it needs to. I think that people think, I think people still blame their disabilities on themselves. And I think that people are still often ashamed of their disabilities. I think people much more than in the past feel that they should live in the community, but seeing it as their right is something that I hope that we can continue to foster and to promote, because it is a right, and people deserve it, and you shouldn't have to be locked away because of your disability. There used to be a magazine called Mouth Magazine, and they had a wonderful cartoon that had a person holding onto some bars at a window looking out, and it says at the bottom, the caption says, "If disability isn't a crime, why are so many of us locked up?" And I think that COVID puts this very sharp edge on that whole problem, because if you look at it, people were locked in there. They were not able to get out. They weren't really given adequate protections. Workers and people that lived there were not. And so many of them died. And, we can write it off and say, well, they had other conditions, or they were old or whatever, but that doesn't make it right. That shouldn't have happened. And I could say a lot more about that, but that's kind of a different subject. But I mean, I think that people, if you ever needed an argument of why people should be living in their own homes and not in big congregated warehouse type settings, that is a perfect example. And we're living through it now. It's a little better now than it used to be, but we're living through it now. And we should take that to heart and let it fuel our passion to make this really, really happen.
That's an awesome quote. Stephanie, do you have any questions you want me to ask?
Well, I just want to point out that Texas played a starring role in that this is where the whole money follows the person program started. I mean, we passed a rider back in 2001 on the budget. It's like a little budget instruction, and it said that basically the money should follow the person from the institutional setting to the community, and that people had the right to use that. And we did that in 2001. And then around that, we had been fighting for a long time. And when oh, there's so many pieces of this. When the Olmstead decision was when the Olmstead case was in front of the Supreme Court, there was a friend of the court brief that came in that said that people, that these states didn't support having disabled people having the right to live in the community. And a whole slew of states signed on, like, oh, maybe 30 or something like that. And so we started in ADAPT, we started a campaign to get those states to come off of that brief. And we were hoping to get all of them off, but and one of the pictures that I gave you is a little chart that I made of the states that originally signed on to this anti-disability brief that was given to the court. And then as they decided to come off, and they would send a letter to the court saying, we don't want to be on that brief anymore, I would cross them off on the list. And that's one of the pictures that I sent you. And we organized people in almost every state that was on the list to go and to talk to their governors and talk to their attorney generals and talk to their state legislators and get them to understand why this was so important and what it was about. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that's really good about that, and what happened here in Texas, is that the leadership of the state got an idea of what was going on here and what was really at stake, and that people deserve to live in the community. And they had family members and so forth that were in these situations. I mean, I remember talking to some of the most, at that time, some of the most conservative members of the legislature, and they would say, yeah, my mother-in-law is in a nursing home and we found her naked the other day, or, you know, some personal story that connected to it. So we got that, and the rider, that budget instruction, was introduced by one of the first openly gay legislators in Texas. And then when we went to Bush and we pushed Bush to support Olmstead, and he was actually a lot more supportive than our then Attorney General Cornyn, who is now one of our senators. And Cornyn just refused to do anything. And Bush was more sympathetic to the idea. He couldn't make Cornyn do it, or he didn't want to. I don't know exactly what happened there. But when he was elected president, then we went to him at the national level as ADAPT, and we said, you know, you committed in your campaign to supporting implementation of getting people out of institutions. And he said that eventually he agreed that he did, and that's when he started his administration working on Money Follows the Person at the national level. So we imported our state efforts, which were very successful from the beginning. Thousands and thousands of people were getting out before they even started counting how many people were getting out. Wow. I mean, you know, when you look at the numbers today, they don't count those way back days. But anyway, that success rate was shown to be, you know, was used as a example to give to other states that we could do this, and it wouldn't, you know, was a real thing. And that was very helpful.
It's people taking the power, believing they have their rights, insisting on it, and it saved thousands and thousands of lives, and who knows how much money.
Right.
So everybody wins under Olmstead, under Money Follows the Person.
It's so true. It's so true.
So do you have any suggestions for the next steps that today's listeners can take from this? What should their next step be?
Well, I think people need to work very hard to feel their right to be out in the community, and that they have the right to live out in the community, and not just they do, but other people do as well. And not accept the institutional bias in our services. And when that's such a jargony term that everybody uses, but what it means is that nursing homes and other kinds of institutions are required by law for nursing homes and by just general social acceptance for people with developmental disabilities in those kinds of institutions, and people with mental health disabilities. There's this acceptance that people go there, and that is the de facto required way to go. Whereas all the community services that are available, and they've expanded greatly, but all those services are optional. And so if there were budget cutbacks or whatever, they're going to cut the community because the other is a required service. And that is also the attitude of government. And that is something that we need to fight. We need to, you fight it by talking to government officials, but you also fight it by talking it up in your community, talking to your church group about the right to live in the community, or your synagogue, or your, wherever. And other organizations that you belong to, places where you share ideas with other members of the community, that go to your city council and just talk to them about this. Your city doesn't actually do a lot of stuff about long-term care, but they can pass a resolution that supports disabled people's rights to live in the community. Your county can do the same thing. I mean, you can push this idea in those kinds of ways and just get it out there into the world. Write an op-ed piece for your newspaper, or if you're not a big writer, you could, just go to city council and tell your story as a person who is either gotten out of a nursing home. And I think that people that got out have a bit of a duty to join the fight, because really it's not over. It needs to keep going. But
They're
also
role models.
Right. And if you are just a person living in the community, but you're afraid you may have to go into a nursing home or other institution if community services aren't properly supported, talk about that. That's a very real thing. And a lot of people feel that way, and rightly so. And they need to share that fear. They need to say to their communities, this isn't right, and you shouldn't be supporting this. And if you don't fight it, you're supporting it. So those are all kinds of ways.
Those are excellent ideas of what next steps people can take. I thank you for sharing your stories, your view, your history, your wisdom. You have definitely used your power, and that museum will encourage people to use their power for generations to come. If you're watching this show, I hope you take her words to heart and remember to like and subscribe to the Use Your Power show, which is a bi-weekly podcast. And remember, you can sign up with RevUp as a regional representative, get information news alerts, newsletters. Use your power. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Your friend